Systems on.
You are clear to launch.
Launch sequence complete. Caution, starboard collision.
Thank you, and please visit again. Please proceed to assigned landing bay.
Landing gear down. Caution, front collision. Caution, deck collision. Caution, starboard collision. Caution, front collision. Caution, deck collision. Caution, port collision. Caution, front collision. Caution, starboard collision.
Landing complete. Have a pleasant stay. You are clear to launch.
Launch sequence complete.
Thank you, and please visit again.
Quantum travel engaged.
Landing gear up.
Quantum travel complete. Quantum travel engaged. Quantum travel complete. Quantum travel engaged. Quantum travel complete.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Star Citizen Live Builds, Publishes, and Platforms. Or was it Platforms and Publishes? Who knows? I'm your host, Jared Huckabee, and joining us on the show this week are a roundtable of incredibly technical director-type folks who are involved in bringing all the aspects of Star Citizen that all of our wonderful developers create over the course of the days and the months and the weeks, and bring them together into builds and publishes and make them accessible to you, the players. So we are stepping back behind the scenes here, and we are joined by, well, a couple people. Let's just go around the room and see who we're talking to. Miles? I think you've been the longest since you've been on one of our shows, so we're going to start with you first. Who are you? What do you do for Star Citizen?
I'm the director of build operations. I manage the team which deals with the version control mostly and the build system, creating the builds that we deliver out to the players.
Okay. Ahmed, we'll go to you next. Who are you and what do you do for Star Citizen?
I am Ahmed Shakir. I've been with CIG for 5.5 years. My team and I were publishing technology. We receive the build once it comes out from the build system, and we try to deliver it to every single player, whether internally, externally, leveraging a lot of cloud technologies, automation, and some good old school also system management and system engineering about how to keep all these moving parts together to deliver like a good player experience, and at the same time to harvest as much debug information. And because we're in active development, so it's kind of very unique kind of role. We're not just serving a live product. We're also, yeah.
All right. And then there's Benoit. So on the show today, Benoit, who are you? What do you do?
You need to say my last name first.
That's a good one.
Beau séjour.
Ah, so good, actually.
Benoit
so good.
Beau séjour.
You aced it. All right.
You're the only one I can ace. You're the only I practiced. You know I worked at it.
I know you did. Cool. I'm Benoit. I'm the CTO at Turbulent. So I manage and oversee all of the teams that make platform services, and so that includes website, launcher, and a couple of in-game services as well.
Beau séjour.
So that means taking Miles's build that goes through Ahmed's systems and getting that into your hands.
Gotcha. So I imagine the three of you work pretty closely throughout the month, week, day. I don't know.
Well, yeah. How many builds a day, Ahmed? Sometimes.
A lot too. I mean, that's the good thing. We deploy a lot of builds behind the scenes that we get to decide whether they can make it or not. So not all the builds that we deploy you will get to see.
Right.
But sometimes there's so many. Yeah.
Yeah. Not every build even makes it to the point where it can deploy. Some of the builds are. Yeah. So let's talk about that before we get into the question and answer period, which is what most of the show is. This is a bit of a esoteric show. It's different than we normally do. Most of the time, when people look at the stuff that other games put out, their behind the scenes stuff, we're never talking about build systems and publishing and platform stuff. So we're in an area that a lot of folks may not be familiar with. So let's talk about how a build becomes a law. That was Schoolhouse Rock. Never mind. Let's begin by doing an overview. How does the build and publish process work?
So, I mean, it obviously starts with the developer committing a change. Once that goes through that process, we have tools which allow the developers to kick builds from our release streams. Once the build is finished, we go through a manifest process and we create what we call the build manifest. And basically, it's just the list of files that dictates what the launcher should patch down, and we upload that and kind of hand off to Ahmed from there.
Yeah, that's where the custody kind of switches from a team to another. But also we do not really have silos. Like all these teams actually work together for so many years. So it can be that we can actually be following up on the build and the build system and trying to anticipate what could be wrong. And you could be also looking at deployment and see what could have gone wrong. So from that moment that we have a build, we have a manifest, it depends on the size of the deployment. If the deployment is going to go to in a single region, a small number of audience, a QA or a staging deployment, this is fully automated. You go through a web interface, you click deploy, everything gets created from scratch, share nothing. Like VMs get created, a Kubernetes deployment for a new generation of services, namespace gets created, a Helm deployment chart gets initiated. That chart is a global chart, has other charts underneath it. A lot of moving pieces, so many moving pieces gets deployed, so you can have that fleet of services and the simulators, that dedicated game servers deployed in the cloud, accessible whether it's an internal group of people or external. If it's external, we so far, due to how rapid things are changing, we'll have to have a captain to have someone who's really running the deployment. So every deployment in that case is a get branch. You go take our automation repo and you create a branch, and that branch will have some of the facts that are specific to this deployment. These facts are always changing. We're allowing very last minute change because we are a development company. We are really developing as we go. So now we're trying to take away any ability to change things very fast. So that deployment gets created. It's a blue-green deployment, and all the resources get allocated around the world, and it's hidden. At this time, our internal QA start hitting it. And depending, every deployment has a goal too. Like every deployment has a very specific goal, whether we're delivering a feature, we're testing a feature, we're collecting feedback, and QA hits that part hard. And there is another checklist with other departments. Everyone has to know this is a new gamer experience where we are exporting or publishing a full gamer experience. It's not a bunch of virtual machines just being deployed in the cloud, and everyone has to get an agreement, and all the work gets done. And then the players see the light comes on in the launcher. And I think that's where you get to see more. I mean, Platform is involved in all of that. Like all these systems are super involved. But Platform, you get to see more like, okay, we're ready to publish right now. And I think Benoit can explain that better than me.
Yeah, so that's where usually my team comes in, where we've built tools to allow the deployment to go out. So that includes securing the build from who needs to have access to it. As Ahmed was pointing out, there's a lot of builds that players don't see that are used for internal testing, that are used for QAing a specific feature or doing ad hoc testing on a specific refactor or something like that. So that is internal, but the moment it needs to go external, so either it goes on PTU or on production, that's where the launcher release tools come in. And so this allows us to take the build manifest that Miles was speaking about and basically make it available to players to patch. And so that's where the Delta patching technology comes in. That's able to do rapidly look at the build that you have and the build that's now available and compute the difference, and then just give you the objects that you need to run the latest version of the game. Obviously, for that, there's a lot of user-facing services. And every time there's a user-facing service, that means a lot of responsibility related to security, scalability, et cetera, et cetera. So that's mostly the platform teams that take care of the maintenance of those systems. But the operation of it is fully in the teams. And so that's the great part. So that's pretty much the build process in a nutshell, I think.
In a nutshell, that's the nickel version. The nickel version of the process, at the very least. We only got an hour-long show here.
Sure.
So we do. So as usual, we're taking questions live from the chat. If you have a question that's related to the build, publish, or platform process, you can submit it in the chat. These are all things that exist external of the game. So as a general rule of thumb, if your question has anything to do with what's inside the game, this is not the show for that. So those questions won't be asked. Additionally, we also collected questions throughout the week, as we usually do from Spectrum. We pulled out the ones that were appropriate to our guests here, so let's start in with those while some of the live ones come in. Miles, how does the process of creating and maintaining a build from a dev branch work? For example, how is specific functionality selected from the dev branch, put into a build such as 3.10, whilst others are left behind in game dev? And then once it's created, how are these changes maintained between each build?
Sure. So we actually maintain dozens of dev streams where individual features live and are housed. And as those features get completed, they're merged up into the more collective streams that get tested by QA as well, so we can kind of see how they play together before creating the release branch eventually. Usually once everything's ready for like a 3.10 or 3.11, we'll branch that out and start cutting builds from there. We have a pretty robust inclusions process that allows us to strip it down and make sure things aren't going out that shouldn't be yet. And then as far as I think I already touched on that. We kind of have a nice user interface that developers, anybody production can go and request a build. So production a lot of times is the ones responsible for kicking the release builds and maintaining that pipeline of who does what, when the build's where. As far as how to get selected things, so obviously bug fixes go into our release streams. We have a bunch of internal automated tools that as soon as changes are submitted to those streams, we start bringing those changes back down to the lower level developers and distributing them out so that everybody has access to those changes as quick as possible.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that maybe isn't always apparent, that everybody's working in these individual feature streams. So that the active feature team can work in their stream, and the ship team can work in their stream. The ship art team can work in their, the feature team is this one, art team is this one, and they're all working in these different streams so they don't step on each other's, toes and overwrite each other's work while they're working. And then that process of integration is where bugs are born. Quite often.
It's huge. We actually manage quite a few microservices that kind of back the whole build process, and that's probably the most heavily used microservices, that integration process at the moment. It's thousands a day, easily.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the number. Every check-in generates a number. When the builds that go live, the people often just see, like, we call it patch 311, but then there's that secondary number, the change log number. That is how many different check-ins there have been each one. And when people who follow Evocati or follow PT or whatever, when they see that number rise, like, that is how many check-ins have made that particular build. Not how many check-ins are done, just the ones that actually were included in that particular build and put in. It's a staggering number.
Right.
It does do a couple traffic jams on those integration days for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Benoit, what database technology are we using, and why? Are we using SQL, no SQL? What are we using?
Well, so the answer is complicated, but we do use a plethora of databases. Platform systems tend to rely on structured data, and so they're going to mostly leverage technologies like MySQL or MariaDB, which is the same kind of engine. But since a lot of the game systems are also made by microservices, then each service can actually use its own data store. And so we have the ability to use the right data store for the right use. So it's not like NoSQL for everything or right. SQL for everything, right? It's more like this use case needs a structured data set, and so we're going to use this engine, right? So in general, the technologies that are in use in the game today and in platform, both of them share a lot of these technologies, but MySQL is used to persist a lot of the data on both ends. There's MongoDB is also a big player in a lot of the dynamic variable systems that power the game. And Redis is a real workhorse for a lot of the really real-time stuff, like Spectrum red counts or distributed logs. We're going to use Redis for a lot of this, which is really our Swiss Army knife of databases there.
So the right database for the right job. Then.
Correct.
Anything using like FileMaker Pro?
No. Those some people want those features. But, yeah, no, we don't have FileMaker.
I was just about to say we deprecated this a week ago. We had it, but we had to deprecate it. Yeah.
Ahmed, what type of AWS servers do the platform and PU currently run on? What can you tell us?
Yeah. I mean, we can tell everything because it's public offering. Everyone knows about it. We use a large variety of VM sizes and families, but the major common factor between all of them is the AWS Nitro, which is a KVM lightweight technology that AWS introduced with their next generation or new generation. When it comes to the game servers run in C5. If we have some backers watching the live stream from the days before 3.0, we were doing some comparisons between the C4 and the C5. These were changes in the hypervisor, changes in the CPU powering the VM underneath. When it comes to the cloud, you're usually trying to hit a very specific sensitive part of your workload. So for the game servers, we have to meet in two main areas. We need to maintain a decent ratio between the memory and the compute, and we need to make sure that we have very fast compute. So C5s fit that very well. We have other services that are single-threaded, that they need a very, very fast single-core clock speed, so that you would run on Z1D, also another Nitro instance. We have other services that require moderate CPU clock speed, but they have larger memory usage. They will be running on R5. So it's all in our availability. Actually, a lot of our workload, we try not to be stuck to one single size, because we need to make sure if there is any issues and we cannot allocate VMs from that size, we always have a backup size. We have backup regions behind our regions, but sometimes you have to choose your battle, whether you're willing to go to a second region to allocate resources, or you're willing to go for the second most optimal machine size. I hope this is not so boring, but we use a lot of them, and we try to use the new ones.
The thing that's interesting. The thing that's interesting about that is that you realize that sometimes you try to get a VM from the cloud and you can't because they're out of VMs, and so that's
Yes.
And you end up playing the world's most advanced game of whack-a-mole.
I mean, it's what keeps the job like interesting and entertaining.
It just got the image. What is it? The of Ahmed was there with spinning plates.
Yeah.
On the rods. Yeah. I guess a follow up here. Are our game servers dynamically deployed depending on the user requesting to play, and can game servers dynamically scale by load?
Yes, we are very proud of our auto-scaling system. We have a buffer-based auto-scaling system. Game servers are slot-based. So if the game instance will take a specific number of slots, you cannot overload that. So when you auto-scale a system like that, you are bound to use what we call a buffer system, where you always have a step ahead of you of VMs or instances, both in the logical and in the physical level, that are ready to serve the players. And that buffer size, how much you maintain ahead of you, has to do with how fast it takes an instance from scratch to load the map and be ready for players. So these are adjusted. This auto-scaling system works on a regional level. So the guys in Sydney, it could be a rush hour for them. So we start spawning VMs over there. The US and the EU are not affected. And yeah, it's a very essential system for us, because game behavior, like gamers' behavior, is always up and down, and we cannot have resources idle around. And these are quite large VMs, so we cannot just have them hanging out for no use.
Not with that attitude. All right. Let's see what we got from the chat here. Miles, what's changed hardware-wise since the last time we talked about this, and what effect has it had on build times and publishes?
Sure. Well, I think it's been about 4 years since we last talked about this topic, so we've pretty much upgraded across the board, be that storage, RAMs, adding more CPUs. We've also spent a lot of time utilizing all the hardware a lot better with better build distribution across the machines. And a lot of that has helped greatly over the last 4 years. So we used to at least 6 hours per build. Back then, we could only have about 2 running at any given time. Nowadays, we're sitting at about 3 to 4. We can have up to 4 builds running simultaneously. And we probably put out 12 to 15 builds a day now. It's pretty regularly, especially with all the feature stream support that we've added over the last year or two. The builds are getting kicked very regularly, and it's almost a constant queue and stream of builds coming through.
Where does that phrase come from, kicking builds? Like when did builds become a thing that were kicked?
I mean, it's like kicking a can down the road, right? You just keep it going until it gets to the trash can.
That's a very appropriate analogy. That's probably it exactly, Miles. Is merging feature branches difficult?
It can be. Fortunately for me, the developers typically own a lot of the processes because nobody can solve their resolution conflicts better than they can. There is a somewhat heavy build process to that where we always try to test the changes upon merging and make sure that they're not going to break anything in the stream that they're going to. So that it's time consuming. I'd say it was a better answer.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that developers have the ability to kick off a build. Is that a good thing?
I go back and forth on that every day. I think typically it's a good thing. The less barriers that we can put in front of developers and allow them to iterate more quickly without need from intervention from us, it helps both them and us, because it frees us up to continue to work on more tools that make their workflow more efficient, and allows them to not be stuck waiting on us for things.
How do we test and benchmark our systems for stability?
That's interesting. So there's been a lot of work there in the past to try to get that up to speed. Nowadays, there are multiple ways where stability is being tested. So on the platform side, for example, we have a set of tools built on Locust, which is a load testing framework written in Python, which is super nice, and it allows us to basically simulate thousands and thousands of users, so we can write scenarios about what they do. For example, melt a ship. Like, what if X amount of players melt a ship, right? How does the system react? So we can test that, and we've used the same principle in the same framework to build a game facing Locust system that we call Pestilence, which is basically yes, I know the naming is nice, but basically what Pestilence is able to do is mimic what you guys do in game. So he's able to log into the game, connect to the servers, and then do specific actions that we want to test. So if, let's say, we have a service that has an issue and we're trying to see what's causing issues, and we can actually write a scenario that does that, and then we can spawn thousands and thousands of locusts doing that in game to simulate what happens when we actually launch a build, because that's usually what happens, is like there's a big storm of people doing the same action. And so we can test stability this way. Now it's getting more and more integrated into the process where we write scenarios for different services as we go. Recently we've added the ability to even provision account data from it, and so we're able to pre-warm some of the databases to prevent some services from getting hit too hard when the patches launch, things like that. So that's one thing that's the major thing that we do for service and platform, specifically for load testing. On the game side, go for it, Mike.
I would say these are headless clients, obviously.
Exactly. Those are even more than headless clients. They're not even running the game itself. They're literally just running the cloud side of the game, if you want. Okay. But we do have headless clients as well. That's where I was going, right? Where there are automated systems that can do, which is called a cloud test launcher, which can actually do that running the game client as well. Yeah. But the testing there is more focused around testing the game server performance than the cloud, the MMO side of the game. Basically.
Yeah, that's Martin Sr. and his team working on that cloud test launcher. We'll actually be talking to his team about it in ISC next quarter, hopefully.
Cool. Awesome.
In case people wonder how far ahead we plan these things. Yeah. Let's see. Ahmed, is there hardware parity between all the different regions? It often seems like. Well, let's just go there. Let's just get that one.
Yeah, 100%. We do not discriminate. They all have the same spec. What really happens is player behavior affects a lot what's happening in the game server, and also your latency. Like the game server, the dedicated game server is a very, very sensitive workload. It's very sensitive to any kind of overhead, sensitive to any kind of latency issues. So no, everything is at parity. We do not discriminate. Actually, the only workload that we have that always run in the same exact platform, no change, no matter what the environment is a dedicated game server. There are other services that we can give them less resources in smaller environments because we know they're not going to get hard. When it comes to that monolith simulator called dedicated game server, we always make sure that it has the same exact spec everywhere it goes.
Okay. I know the second half of the question was this person is from the Australian. I'm guessing this person's from the Australian region, and they were saying that it seems a little more sluggish. But as far as the actual hardware behind in the servers, they are at parity.
It is the same, yeah. And we actually care a lot for our customers in Sydney. Like one time we had issues in the Sydney VPC, and we had to allocate some VMs VMs in Mumbai, like in India, which is it's the far, but still was the closest area in AWS, and they got really upset. We're like super fast. We're gonna fix this issue and go back to Sydney. So if they're having any issues, like I guarantee them, it's not related to the hardware.
How much storage space is needed for one game instance?
It's the same way that, like, when it comes to how much, so that the Windows build and the Linux build are different in size, right? But the different size is very, like, not that big of a deal. The data file, the B4K file that everyone has, I have to have it on my servers too, so we can stream all these static files in and out and make the game server run. So it's very close to how much you download to run your client.
Okay. You said Linux build, and I know there are people. I'm already seeing it show up. You want to go into a little
Server
more detail
build.
on that? Server builds.
Linux server build, yes. I don't talk politics. I talk technology.
Yep. just want to clear that up there so that people don't take that where it shouldn't be. Let's see what else we got from the chat here. When a new build is required for the PTU, how long does it take to compile on average?
3 to 4 hours, roughly.
Is there something in particular that could spike that one way or the other?
Well, there's always a lot of load on the system, so that could always cause times to fluctuate quite a bit. There's a lot of uploading that takes place during that, so sometimes the network can be bogged down.
I was about to add that real quick. It's not just compilation time. There's a lot of fan out and fan in. There's a lot of steps down. We go do a lot of things in parallel, and then we collect them back in. And these are systems. Sometimes they are under development themselves. Sometimes we make changes that make things take longer or take shorter. But yeah, if we were talking in general, like Mike definitely said, between 3 to 4 hours is our average.
And you're right, Ahmed, in that when a build is finished cooking, it's not ready to be distributed. And
they get blow on it for a while.
Yeah.
It's too hot.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta let it sit a bit, right? But no, it's because it needs to be uploaded, right, so that it can be distributed, and that step is fairly long as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the total time is 3 or 4 hours.
Yep.
The client compiles themselves are relatively quick, as the data is typically what takes the longest, and that can go for an hour or two for sure.
It's a big game.
It is a big game.
And only getting bigger. What methods, practices do you utilize to organize branch management between teams?
That's our kind of our internal feature stream setup, where we have teams, as they are getting ready to start work on new features, they will come to us and request a feature branch, and DevOps will go create that feature branch, set up their integration flows using the automated tools that we mentioned earlier. And they'll move into that, and once it's feature complete, we help them where needed to get back into our dev branches and kind of repeat the process with teams as we go.
Is it annoying trying to find a file that was supposed to integrate and didn't?
Occasionally.
Hey, Benoit, let's talk Issue Council. Here's a good one. Are systems like the Issue Council directly linked to the internal JIRAs or whatever, internal JIRAs and stuff?
Yeah. That's been the idea since the beginning, right? Is that the report that's filed and confirmed on the Issue Council gets, if you see the CIG-I on it, then it's been imported to Jira, basically. And so at that point, it can be tracked internally. It can be assigned to, because developers need a Jira ticket to work or check in, right? And so that's the way we legitimize the changes that they have to do. And so, Issue Council is connected the same way to feed the status back from Issue Council. We're aiming to do improvements to that flow to give more visibility, but we still have a long ways to go before we can hit that. The roadmap is the same thing. The current roadmap, so the cards that you see on the roadmap, also comes from Jira. So this is a live representation of the production as it stands the moment it gets put up there. It is connected, and that's the key. It's the data source and the data destination.
Gotcha. What level of automation do we have in our build and deployment process? Is it highly manual? Is it highly automated? How would you characterize it, Ahmed?
I'll talk about the deployment size. So when it comes to deployment, depending on that, I kind of touched on that earlier on the deployment size. If it's a smaller deployment that locates like reasonable amount of cloud resources, this is fully automated. Anyone can go through a GUI interface and click. And these deployments, you are not allowed to change so much of them. You can only change a few specific facts, and it's based on a system that runs off Git, of like a source version control system. And it gets deployed automatically. Everything gets built, and everything can get destroyed also by a GUI or by a user interface. When it comes to any large public-facing environment, we're talking about a lot of resources. So in the current phase of the project, because we also still have systems or areas in our automation that are imperative, where we tell it how to do things, not what we want. That's a very important topic. A lot of people I see in the questions are from the DevOps community. That's a big thing. We're trying to shift a lot of our stuff from telling the automation how to get there to what we want, and let the automation business system like frameworks obtain that state. But to go back to the point, if you have a larger environment, at the initial part of it, you have to have a human decision. You have to have a review, another human decision, making sure that these are the correct values. And then it goes from there, and it becomes automated, and autoscaling kicks in and manages the environment from here.
Yeah, I think it's comparable to a lot to the way that we use like procedural generation in our planets and stuff. You can use these automation tools to help you and to assist and to get you started or to maybe even finish a job. But there's always got to be these checkposts where humans are involved to validate the decisions, to determine what's going on. It's just you'll never there's no replacement for the human element.
And just to add something real quick, as the project matures, as parts of the project mature, as we know we're not going to be moving a lot of knobs here, we can offset these parts and make them like super self-maintained. Self-healing is a big topic in our industry, and we want to talk about it. If a reactive environment, the environment that reacts to itself, and we might get to talk about that a little bit, about how we are trying to enhance the metrics or the traces or the logs or the insights inside our services, so we can let our infrastructure make decisions based on these insights.
Yeah. I mean, one key part that's still a human intervention, I think, both on platform and game, is the flip of the environments, right? So the game, as Ahmed was mentioning, is deployed using the green-blue deployment. That means that while you guys are playing a game online on prod, for example, and we're preparing a new build, there's that's the blue one, and then the green one's being built, or vice versa, right? And so at some point when the build's validated, there's the flip happens, and a human says, okay, we're flipping, and that's where the build goes live. It gets available in a launcher, servers are flipping over and rotating, and so that's still a human doing that, and it actually requires a couple people saying yes before it actually happens.
Oh no, I remember I learned that specifically with the launch of 3.0, when I'm sitting in a bathroom with a razor ready to destroy that giant gremlin that was on my face, and everybody's going through the go no go checks, and everybody's like, oh yeah, everybody's right, everybody, and then it comes down to it's got to be Chris or Aaron to give the final go before they actually flip the environment over, and Chris goes, it's just everybody's quiet, and goes, well, maybe we should do a couple more checks. I'm sure Jared doesn't want to get rid of the beard just yet. And boy, did I I'm in that call. I'm supposed to keep it muted. I'm not supposed to contribute that call. I'm just there monitoring. But you can bet I unmuted my mic and I let some people have some colorful words.
That's an epic day. No one will forget the 3.0 day.
It's very similar from the build system as well, which is highly automated, but somebody always has to make the decision to request a build, even if that's a release build.
Right. From the live chat, is there a secret dev build?
A secret dev build?
A secret dev build?
There's always a secret dev build.
They've all got their feature builds.
Ahmed, what deployment strategy are we using? Are we doing rolling, canary? What are we using?
So we do them all. Like we discussed in the beginning about how we do blue-green. Blue-green is usually when we are delivering a lot of breaking changes. A lot of things are like, okay, we cannot have half and half. These things are not going to play nice together. And this is in development like a product currently in development, so we need to get you guys in the new stuff so we can see what's going on. From the moment that we publish a big build to a large environment like live, we can do what we call them hotfixes. We can do between 5 and 20 hotfixes. And these are either canary released or rolled. Like in 3.10.0, we canaried 6 hotfixes for the hub server, and we rolled the last one. And that happens in every single aspect. There are areas of the game that can allow for some toggling, where we can toggle features on and off, or hot coding or hot changing data. And there are other areas that because the challenge in running a game in the cloud is the statefulness, the experience between a very immersive game like ours, a game client like ours, and the game server is super stateful. This is a very fragile experience. If you did anything here, you lose that connection. And we are actually always discussing how we can make that less fragile, so people like us do not have so many precious parts of our environments that we cannot touch, that the players are off. But we do both. We do canary, we do rolling, and we also initially do a blue-green. Hopefully in the future, as the project matures, we stop dealing with the concept of a deployment. It's an environment that's always going, and there's always pieces moving all the way around. But we still have to do a lot more things before we get there.
It's fair. Miles, what's the average duration of a full production rebuild on the main Star Citizen branch?
Thankfully, thanks to our caching, we haven't had to do one of these in a very long time.
I don't think we've had to do one of those in a while.
I think the last time that we did do one, it ran for about 24 hours. Thankfully, that almost never happens nowadays.
I'm trying
discs.
I'm trying to.
Scratch discs.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which Chris Roberts game it was where somebody basically deleted the entire. It basically deleted all of game dev, and they basically salvaged the game by having somebody had taken a copy home of all of game to work on home, and they had to carry this person's computer from home into the office with on pillows. I'm trying to remember which game that was. I think it was Strike Commander. Ben would know. Ben would know. I think it was Strike Commander. How many? We touched on this a little bit, but we'll do it again. How many human or manual interactions are there between commit and deploy?
To get a build, there's only 2. It'd be the developer making the commit and then the developer kicking the build. Depending on what environment you're wanting to deploy to, it could be potentially 1 more human interaction, which uses the same interface we kick our builds through to deploy to our internal staging environments. I think Ahmed could address outside of that for me.
Yeah. If it's a larger environment, it goes through like people talking. It goes through people deciding that this is the build we want to go with, and then from then the humans just do the decisions. What we were talking about earlier, everything is driven by version control, everything's driven by get, but there's a human saying yes. And we did not abstract that into a GUI yet. We didn't see the need for that. This is we call ourselves DevOps. I know this is some kind of hairy topic for a lot of people. DevOps is a philosophy, not a title, but that's what the market goes for. But we try to really hold the values of DevOps close to us. We share the ownership of that product. This gaming experience is ours. I can spend more than 50% of my time investigating an issue about how a player is unable to connect something, because I have the access to all these tools, and I can try to go and investigate it. So to go back, when it comes to a deployment to a larger environment, that's usually where human decisions are being implemented, but all the actual work of provisioning, configuring, securing is automated. Or it would take days. It would take weeks to deploy the whole environment manually, like with how it spreads around the world.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to remember you remember what the DevOps what that DevOps chart was. The
figure 8.
Two circles.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what are the points on that one. I'm trying to remember what they are.
It's a lot. See, that's the thing. These terms are coined and they create some issues sometimes. My take on this, I can take the whole. I just want to say, be close to your problems. Know what kind of problems you're trying to solve. And we are in an amazing time where there are a lot of open source projects that you can go and see what everyone else is doing and get it done. Every organization taken, every project taken DevOps is kind of unique. And we are one of the very unique ones.
That's a safe bet. In the last year, this says in the last year, but if you want to go beyond the last year, you can go beyond last year. What patch was the most challenging for you on the back end? If you think of a nightmare patch for you guys, what's the one that you don't like to think about anymore? You want to go last, Ahmed?
I'm thinking
Yeah.
I think 3.0 for me because the patch before that was so far, right? And to echo what Ahmed was talking about in terms of DevOps philosophy, if you don't deploy for a long time, then you forget how to deploy, right? And so 3.0 was the longest running in development patch of Star Citizen, I think, that we've had, right? And launching that touch on everything. Everything was new. There was it was the first for everything. So it's like a brand new game. And so for me, that was by far the most difficult to get across the finish line. And that's when, then going to quarterly made it a whole lot better. As now we can deploy, more often, which is how you get this rhythm going, right? And keeping it going. It also means, to be fair, the more you deploy, the more you break stuff as well, right? So there is a risk there.
Don't touch it.
Yeah,
it's working. Don't touch it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Don't touch it. It's good. But yeah, for 3.0 for me by far. I don't know for you guys.
What about you, Miles?
My problems are very different usually. I'm more heavily involved at the beginning of the cycle, less than the end. So 3.9 was actually pretty challenging to transition to, as far as getting the new stream set up and making sure all the changes were integrated to where they needed to be. We definitely had a good time with that one.
There's a lot of workflow changes in 3.9 for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's a difficult pick between 3.0 and 3.9. 3.0 definitely. 3.0, we rolled out a new hypervisor, a new generation of virtual machines, and a lot of new things, and it was in a very critical time. I think we have an episode of one of our shows that I'm not very good at keeping up with, where we talk about what happened in 3.0. 3.0, there was chat between CR and Tony and us till very I still remember very, very, very dear message to me when Tony said, I gotta go put some gifts under the tree and come back really quick. That was 3.0.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. 3.9 was a lot of fun too. It's like Fleet Week. Wow. We are spoiled by our player base. Our player base are actually developing this game with us. And I'm not saying that because you really see that. And 3.9 was a lot of people doing a lot of things. We were learning a lot. We cannot stop learning from what happened during 3.9 and Fleet Week. And one of the major also ideas in DevOps is measure everything. And as Benoit was talking earlier, testing a game and automating the test of a game is challenging. It's relatively doable to test RBCs or API calls, but the immersion, how the game runs and everything, that is difficult. And 3.9, we had that. We had that. Okay, everyone is testing everything everywhere. They're doing everything, and we were receiving all this data and digesting it, reacting to it. I do not have an accurate number, but the number of hotfixes that went in 3.9 for a week was really, really high.
Yeah, I was wondering if one of you guys were going to mention the conversion to the Delta patcher, if not that conversion. But
actually, this actually went pretty well.
That was 3.0.
It was 3.0, wasn't it?
It was before 3.0 though.
But we got to see the big diff. You're right.
Because we got to run the Delta patcher on PTU for like a month and a half. I just remember my biggest memory about launching the Delta patch system was the moment we had the ability to push a build a day to players. We did that for 48 days straight. I was like, all right.
I do have very vivid memories of converting the build system to support that. That was definitely a challenging time as well.
I have a sad memory from 2015 by coming to the office at 1 a.m. so we can prepare the old school batch, so we release it at 6 a.m. And that was voluntarily. Like we would go and work on it because it used to take hours to prepare these packs and make sure you have all the diffs between all the old versions. Yeah, you actually bring good memories about the Delta Batcher. And right now, sometimes we look at the CDN graphs and we see these beta bytes coming out. Like, can you imagine if the Delta Batcher was not here, how much data you're pushing? It's one of these things that we take for granted now, but it was an amazing big change for us.
Critical technology for sure.
It's a seemingly simple thing, but it's like absolutely critical to the ongoing life of any MMO. Let's see what else we got. Will iCache and global persistence change how long-term persistence is handled?
Oh, well, that's interesting. So, not really. In fact, the long-term persistence was engineered to basically persist your data that you earn in-game between patches, right? So it saves your money and the history of all of the UEC money that you've got. So every transaction up and down, current values of all your ledgers. The inventory system that's part of LTP is also there to store, hey, you own a Hornet, right? Or hey, you own a Constellation, right? The state of these objects. So, this Hornet's missing its left wing was abandoned at Grim Hex, or so that's stored in the persistence system. So iCache will basically bring more state tracking, more state persistence, but we're still going to persist the same amount or the same kind of records between patches to be able to rebuild the state when we do a data wipe on the iCache side. So the reason why that's still an issue is because the schemas of those objects is still moving, right? And so we still need to do that. But the only change that will come from it is that there are some parts of the iCache API that allow better handling of stacking objects. So let's say you buy 50 magazines, right? The way that's handled in the iCache is much better. And so the LTP systems will track that better. And so that's not the only change. But the functionality for players should function the same way.
And for anybody that hasn't checked it out, check out the previous episode of Calling All Devs where we talked with Chad McKinney about iCache and its effect and lead into global persistence. Let's see. We got 10 minutes left. We're almost done. Mm-hmm. Are there any improvements to publishing technology you're excited about in the near future?
Yes. So as we take some of our legacy systems from imperative described deployment, where we are describing to the automation system how to do things, into more declarative systems, we don't want to throw in a lot of jargons, but people who work in DevOps technology must probably know what we're talking about here. That is very exciting for us. We're also looking at how we can leverage some of the bare metal resources that are allowed on a lot of cloud providers now. We've always been trying to squeeze as much power as we can get, and we want to see what will happen when we don't have the hypervisor anymore. Maybe we'll get some more power out of it. Again, we are not till we measure things and we set benchmarks. But yeah, I'm excited for these two things. One of the most important things I'm excited for, we have 2 new engineers that will join the team on Monday. So that is a big thing. Hopefully more hands on the keyboard, more minds, more people designing all these challenging solutions with us. So yeah, a lot of good stuff happening.
This has definitely been a year of growth. Actually, last year was a year. We've been growing for a while. So I'm thinking about it. Over 600 and some odd people now.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. We've been throwing you softballs. Let me look for some hard balls here. When a server crashes, here we go. When a server crashes, why? No.
That's for you, Ahmed.
Because C++? I don't know.
When a server crashes, how long is it until that server is ready to go again? And is this process automated?
Yes. So the server doesn't have to come again. If we are actually in a time where we're shrinking down, we are actually have the servers can go away and never get used again. There's another pool of servers. If we are in a time where actually we need resources, the server will crash and it will come back in a different new incarnation. We'll have new logical name to it, have new ID to it, and it'll become part of the pools of instances that can host games. But yeah, nothing has like a long-lasting name or a long-lasting existence. Everything is the common word that we use in our field is ephemeral. So these instances are just instances. They come and go all the time. No one touches them. They decide to crash on their own. They get sad.
Was it ants not cattle, cattle not pets, right?
Yeah,
Circles.
absolutely.
Ephemeral. Good word use, Ahmed.
Not mine.
What benchmarks do you use to determine how a particular build progresses from Evocati to PTU to live? Now, before you answer that, though, I want to clarify that it's nobody in this call that determines whether something goes from one stage to another stage. Those are calls made by the directors and above and stuff like that. But as far as the benchmarks, just speaking to the type of information that we use to make those calls, what
It's
benchmarks do we have?
actually it's a very collective democratic call. The way it works. Whenever we are in the mode of releasing, we have the live sync meeting that like one of my favorite meetings. We get to have it early in our day, kind of like towards the end of the day in Europe, and we bring up a lot of data. Whenever we go to BTU, there are several types of reports. One of them is a stability report. The stability report tries to model how much disruption we are causing to the player experience. And then we have a player feedback report that comes from the player experience team, and it takes into account all the issue council issues, the feel of the game, if there are any specific features in the gameplay. QA also goes and takes that report and goes through it and try to reproduce by the next morning, all these like data got collected. We have performance data, and then everyone has a case, right? And it's a lot of conflicting factors together that decide. Sometimes we want to progress faster between waves because we need the concurrency. We need more players to see things how things are going. And you get to decide what the messaging is going to be like. What's the trade-off? Okay, it's going to be amazing in all these areas, and this feature is going to be really bad. I think our players, our backers will understand that. We can just explain, avoid this area. It will be all right. And yeah, it's a lot of moving factors. When it comes to benchmark, it's quantified, collected crash information, stability information, performance information, resource usage information, all collected together, all abstracted in a number in a model that we call the stability score. And the same side also, we have hard-working teams that try to collect and summarize the game experience, and both of them get together, and then we have different goals, have different groups, and a very democratic way of deciding how things will go. And hopefully we make the good decisions every time.
No, that's a great answer. There's a ton of hard data, but then there's also that experiential stuff that we get from our QA and stuff from the report. We go to the player experience teams and get their feedback from the players and stuff like that, and all of that gets put into a gumbo of sorts where it looks and it creates a picture that's unique for every single release candidate. And it's like from this candidate to this candidate to this candidate, the exact criteria that determines whether this moves forward and the next step may be different for each one. So there's no easy rubber stamp answer for it, but we use as many tools and equipment and people as possible to make the best possible call.
Even development teams, like some of the game service guys, are going to be watching live PTU builds when they're to see performance metrics and get a sense of it, right? And so that's also in the mix. And so you're right, it is a hodgepodge of different.
You're full of shit. You're always there, just like kick it, just kick it out, just push it.
Yeah. Go.
Benoit's in these things. He's like, I'm on the East Coast. It's already late. Just push it.
LA time builds.
Yep. That's it, guys. You've done it. Congratulations. Right. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy days at the end of your week to be here on the show with us. It's not always it's a relatively dry subject for folks, and people often ask me why are you doing this? I'm like, because this shit's important, and that's twice I've sworn in the last 5 minutes.
That's right.
I'm gonna get an email. Sorry, guys. We are going to do a raid. Who are we raiding today? We are raiding Samilia. Samilia is a streamer in Sweden, if I remember correctly. So check them out. And if you jump into the raid there, that when it kicks off here, tell Samilia to push it live. Benoit said push it live.
Ship it.
Push it live.
Benoit said ship it.
Hashtag
Switzerland.
ship it.
What did I say? Sweden? I think I meant Switzerland.
Switzerland.
So check that out. Tell me
Okay,
to
we're in
ship it.
America. It's called the outer world to us. I'm just joking.
Please send all letters to care of Ahmed, Cloud Pyramid Games, Austin, Texas. For Ahmed, for Miles, for Benoit, I'm Jared. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you next week.